The genre-defining, long-running Final Fantasy series has many great entries, many great stories, and even many defining RPGs of their eras. Choosing exactly which one I would start with was a tough choice, which is why I made all of you make that choice for me instead. You chose Final Fantasy VI, which in hindsight I think was a great choice. I went into Final Fantasy VI not knowing exactly what to expect. I knew details, but I didn't know a bunch of the plot points like for Final Fantasy VII, and didn't know the themes or setting like for Final Fantasy IX and X. I knew that the game would later inspire the Octopath games, but I was blessedly blind to much of what the game had to offer, and I think that was the right way to go into my first ever Final Fantasy game. Now having gained that perspective, I want to tell you what makes this game special, and why it is worth playing over 30 years after its initial release. Final Fantasy VI is the 6th mainline entry in the series. You'd think that would be a given since it's numbered, but that hasn't stopped some series, am I right, Persona? It is a turn-based RPG with the active turn bar style that was introduced in Final Fantasy IV. The game was developed and published by Squaresoft. Final Fantasy VI is notable as the first and last in certain aspects. It is the first game in the series not directed by series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, who had a busy schedule in the mid-90s. It is the last 2D sprite-based game in the series, as well as the last to be released for the SNES. That SNES release happened in April 1994 in Japan and October 1994 in North America. At the time, since not all the Final Fantasy games received Western releases, the game was referred to as Final Fantasy III for the Western release to keep up the numbering sequence. This was changed back to Final Fantasy VI for the PlayStation re-release made by Toes in 1998, with some new animated cutscenes added. The next release would be Final Fantasy VI Advance for the Game Boy Advance in 2006 in Japan and 2007 for everyone else. The Advance re-release added new espers and areas as well as fixing bugs, but lacked the cutscenes of the PlayStation release. The game was ported to mobile platforms in 2014, and that mobile port served as the basis for the first PC port in 2015. From what I can gather, the less said about those versions of Final Fantasy VI, the better. The most recent release was as part of the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters series, which lacked the cutscenes of the PlayStation release and extra content from the GBA release, but did have significant quality of life and artistic improvements. The Pixel Remaster version came to mobile and PC in 2022, Switch and PS4 in 2023, and the Xbox Series in 2024. That is the version that I played. The game was very well received across all its journeys, especially with the initial SNES release. As of 2003, Final Fantasy VI had sold 3.48 million copies. As for figures that are a little more recent than over 2 decades ago, it's a challenge at this point, but I'm sure that between the original, Advance, and the Pixel remasters, we're talking well over 4 million copies, if not pushing 5 at this point. Between that and Final Fantasy VI's status as one of the best RPGs of all time, you pretty much can't ask for a better legacy for a game. Final Fantasy VI takes place in a land where magic is a far distant memory. 1,000 years earlier, a conflict known as the War of the Magi took place and nearly brought the world to ruin. After the war, magic left the world, leaving the people destitute until they found their own way back to industrialization with steampunk technology. However, with technology abundant, the world had reached a balance which does not suit an ambitious empire and its thirst for domination. To achieve hegemony over the world, the Gestalian Empire seeks out an ancient power, a way to bring magic back and combine it with technology to make Magitech. This Magitech allows Gestalt to run rampant over the other nations, but a resistance rises in opposition to the Empire in a group called the Returners. The game introduces us first to a girl named Terra, but over the course of the game you'll be introduced to many other characters, all of whom are important to the game's story and cast. There is a large cast where everyone is supposed to have their chance in the spotlight, and no character is the superior main character of the bunch. If you read any articles, books, or more about Final Fantasy VI's development, it is repeated over and over that the intention was for every character to be the main character in some ways. Whether that succeeds is up to interpretation. I think that description fits for at least half the cast, though. The game's structure aids this by, at times, asking us to follow groups of different characters with distinct adventures across the continents, as well as dividing up the party to face a legion of foes or traverse a challenging area. All of this was a departure not just from previous Final Fantasy games, but most RPGs of the time in general, which has helped Final Fantasy VI in retaining a distinct identity and legacy among the RPGs of this time period and since. The game starts more linear, although with the occasional branching paths, and by the end, Final Fantasy VI is pretty much a self-directed open-world game. This is not an unusual RPG formula, and I don't know the exact history of its development, but this is one of the oldest games that I've seen that opens up between the first and second halves to this degree. I won't go into further details as to exactly how the game does that transition, but I will say that I found it a suitably impressive and thoughtful way to make that change in story and gameplay structure. All that unique structuring would not have worked without solid writing, and Final Fantasy VI certainly has that. Some characters, I would say, have excellent arcs, while others don't get enough focus to gain my attention. I cannot deny, though, that when Final Fantasy VI is at its best, the thematic, deep narrative and character writing absolutely shines. Many of the most memorable moments of the game come not just from excellent sprite art, animation, and poignant music, but from the writing that built it up and then gave us satisfying payoff. That's just in the main part of the story that you're going to encounter on your journey no matter what. You can also seek out further character details for pretty much everyone in the cast if you know where to look. To point out particular moments would go further into spoilers than I would like, but suffice to say, you'll have many great moments to think back on from the Final Fantasy VI story experience. Now, as for gameplay, the initial basic setup for Final Fantasy VI's combat is very familiar for those who have played prior Final Fantasy games or other contemporary RPGs. You have a party of up to 4 characters fighting with an active turn bar dictating when you can act with each member of your party. You have the option to attack, defend, use an item, or use magic, which costs MP. Now you might be wondering, wait, magic? Wasn't the game's story about a world without magic? This is true, and is the biggest departure from prior games in the series when it comes to narrative. However, when it comes to gameplay, there are a couple of characters who do learn magic naturally and can use it from the moment you can play as them. Most of the characters cannot, however, but during the game you can start collecting something called a magicite. Using the magicite is mainly how characters can learn magic, including characters who don't naturally learn it from leveling. After battle, you will gain magic experience, which will help dictate your character's learning of the various magics that are on offer. Beyond that, equipping these is crucial to consider because leveling up while having a particular magicite equipped will also give a bonus to your stats. So, in addition to using the Siren magicite to learn spells like Sleep, Silence, Slow, and Fire, when you level up, you get an additional 10% to your HP. It's an unusual system that takes some getting used to, but once you are used to it, it allows strong customization for stat boosts and allows a lot of spell diversity in your party. It is also extremely exploitable if you want to go down that path. Magic is very powerful in Final Fantasy VI, and when everyone can potentially learn every spell in the game, you can use it to devastating effect. That is the magic option, but most of the characters have another unique ability on top of their attack and magic. These abilities are tied into their personality, job, status, etc. For instance, our resident treasure hunter, Locke, has the ability to steal from enemies. Cyan, who is a samurai, has different Bushido techniques that he can use in battle. These abilities tied to specific characters are the greatest distinguishers between them when it comes to combat, which I love as a concept. I didn't always love how Final Fantasy VI implemented them, however, because the gulf between the ease of learning how to use a character's unique skill set as well as the utility of it was significant. To be clear, the best characters, and therefore the ones I used most frequently, had great mechanics that kept me on my toes and planning throughout battle. However, then there are ones like Cyan's Bushido abilities, which are easy to understand, but they are slow to trigger and struggle to be as useful in the late game areas. Compare that to Gao's Rage/Leap ability, which has a whole tutorial around it because it's not very straightforward to learn, but if you can master it, then Gao can absolutely devastate your opponents. I definitely wish things were better balanced and explained, but you can make every character work in the party. You might just need to dedicate more time and patience to make one character useful over another. As the final pixel art Final Fantasy game, I don't think it's surprising to say that presentation-wise, Final Fantasy VI knocked it out of the park. Given the continued limitations from the SNES as a console, the pixel art is absolutely gorgeous, with distinct characters, locations, and clever animations to communicate all the information you need to know. Final Fantasy VI looks great in the original form, as well as the pixel remaster. If they did ever do an HD 2D or a 3D Final Fantasy VI, it would be a tall task to reach the same level of visual creativity, but I do kinda hope they try it just to see what happens. To use examples, I'll start with the character designs, which convey the character's history and personality without them saying a word, based just on the dress, the colors of the outfits, and the animation. You can see the pride in Celeste's bearing that fits her status. You can see the difference between Edgar and Sabin based on the way they dress, even though they do look pretty similar otherwise. It's an impressive level of detail that I appreciated through the entire game. There are so many scenes that are visually great and enhanced further by creative direction and pacing. The easiest example of this quality is the iconic opening for the game. The music has also bolstered my opinion of Nobuo Uematsu's work. As someone who had only encountered his music via Fantasian previously, this is a huge step up. This soundtrack is gold. There are occasions where I question why a particular track was placed in a particular moment, but I don't put that onus on Uematsu. The music itself is still excellent, and in most occasions when they did have the right song playing at the right part, you can feel it. The sound effect team also must be given kudos for Kefka's iconic laugh, as well as strong work in and out of battle. As for UI and UX, the UI is pretty easy to understand and work with, but the game is not the easiest for UX, as there are a lot of menus within menus, including sometimes for battles. The Pixel Remaster's main improvements come with the art and with allowing you to turn on/off encounters, especially helpful in areas like Zozo if you need to go through there multiple times, and increasing or decreasing XP, Gold, and Magic XP rates. I am all for games doing what they can to reduce the grind while retaining the original experience for those who want it. Certainly it's not as impressive or detailed as a full remake would be, but for those who want to play the game with some modern polish, the Pixel Remaster is a great path to do so. I always figured that when I played a Final Fantasy game for the first time, I would quickly be able to understand the appeal. And I now do. Final Fantasy VI was an excellent experience that has kept my interest in pursuing more of the games down the line. If you are like me and never played a Final Fantasy game, while there are many great games to start from, I'll say that Final Fantasy VI was not just a good place to start for me, it was the right place for me to start from. So thank you to all those who voted in the poll. With all that being said, between Suikoden 2 and Final Fantasy VI, I think I'm ready to play some RPGs not from the 90s. I love them and all, but I am feeling the need for some more modern conveniences. I will be back though, so stay tuned for my next RPG adventure and the next Final Fantasy game on my list, which, according to the poll, would be Final Fantasy IX. If you want to follow that journey and me, please consider subscribing and commenting below your thoughts on Final Fantasy VI or whatever else you have on your mind. Leave the video a like as you are doing so, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Have a great day, and happy gaming.